Good morning. I'm grateful to see everyone here today. Let me grab something I need real quick that I didn't bring up to the pulpit. Bible would be a good thing to have for Bible class, wouldn't it? We are, let's see, we are in, I believe, still in section 12. We've gone through the text, but I don't believe we've answered the questions. And so that's section 12 of the book, page 38, the agony in Gethsemane. We have not yet gone through the questions there, so we're going to do that here this morning. And so we'll start with the first question. And Billy, if you would you start us out there, please? All right. All right. Number 2. All right. Over the brook Cedron or Kidron, depending on your translation, and Gethsemane, correct. Number 3. All right. Number 4. Okay. Number 5. Angel. Yes. Number 6. All right. And number 7. And number 8. All right. And that's the questions for that section. So now we move to page 41 in our books, where we enter into part 4, the condemnation and the cross. And we're going to start with the betrayal and arrest of Jesus and the the deserting or desertion of his disciples. And we're going to start out by reading from Matthew 26, verses 47 through 56. Matthew 26, verses 47 through 56. And I tell you what, let's start with Robert and move forward. Matthew 26, 47 through 56. Read about 3 verses and then next person. All right, now we're going to move to Mark chapter 14, verses 43 through 52. Mark 14, verses 43 through 52. All right, now we'll go to Luke chapter 22, verses 47 through 53. Luke 22, verses 47 through 53. All right, now we'll go to John chapter 18, verses 2 through 12. John chapter 18, verses 2 through 12, and we'll start with John Hart. All right. So when we last left off our class, Jesus was making the statement, "He is at hand that doth betray me." Now we're told, before he could even finish these words, Judas and these Roman soldiers and came, or these soldiers came with him. They also saw the fact that, like Judas was not alone. There's a great multitude with him. They had a variety of weapons. We're told that they had swords. staves, and staves would be clubs. We're also told that they had lanterns with them to help. This is at night, and so to help them see their way as they travel towards where Jesus would be. They had the lanterns to see as they go throughout the night. Judas was at the head of this march, leading these soldiers to Jesus. Now, obviously, Judas isn't here because they're going to have this great number of conversions. They're not going to obey Christ. They're coming here for a more nefarious purpose. And we're told that he received a band of men. And from what I've studied, the numbers are not, they differentiate between the people that the resources I looked at to find out the number of a band. But this probably would have been somewhere around 500 to 600 individuals. And to us, that may seem like that's a lot of soldiers to have in order to take one person. But as we're going to find out a little bit later, it may not have been just Christ that they wanted in this instance. We don't fully know. But I do find it interesting the way that Judas is described here. He is still mentioned to us as one of the 12. So I just kind of find that interesting that he's still mentioned by that designation at this time. We're told that Judas states that there's a sign that he would give to show the perpetrator. And there are probably a few reasons why he would have done this. One, this is at night. And again, nighttime for them is a little bit different than nighttime for us in the fact that, we can flick a switch or something of that nature and you have light, and it's usually a bright light. The lanterns they had may not have been as bright. It may not have been as easy to see. But you also consider the fact that Judas would have had some Roman soldiers with him. And so Jesus was probably an unknown to these Roman soldiers, at least for the most part. He may have been known to a few. After all, we read of the centurion that came to Christ. But for the most part, they probably didn't know him. And Jesus was probably unknown to others as well. Despite the fact that his fame grew, there's probably still a lot of people who didn't know who he was. And so as such, Judas has a sign that he's going to give to show them who the Christ is, or who this Jesus of Nazareth is. The one that I give a kiss to, he's the one. You seize him. And Mark's account says you seize him and bring him away safely. And again, I find that interesting that Judas's remark here in Mark's account is when you take him safely away. Just kind of an interesting description that Judas would give of one he's going to have turned over to the authority. And so Judas comes to Christ and he says, "Hail, Master." And this was a usual greeting. And it was a compliment that the Jews gave to each other. Why do you think that Judas is greeting Jesus this way? Judas is about to turn Christ over to the authorities, but his first words are, "Hail, Master." Why do you think he's doing this? Or he's introducing himself that way? Mm-hmm. It could very well be habit. We do fall into, as far as the way that we do certain things, and so it could just be the case, like you said, just he was used to greeting Christ that way, that's the way that he addressed others, and so it just slipped out that way. And there very well could have been deception at play as well, in the fact that here he is, this is a term of wishing health and prosperity. He's making this statement to Jesus, and at the same time, He's not here for the wealth and prosperity or the health and prosperity of Jesus. He's essentially plotting the Savior's destruction. Either one of those could very well be the case. And so, to further this trick, but also to let the soldiers know who Christ is, he tenderly kisses Christ on the cheek. And the Greek says that Jesus and Judas kissed each other again and again and again and again. And this would have just been a common greeting. When you read verses like this, or even say like Romans 16:16, to greet one another with an holy kiss, that would have been a kiss on the cheek. And that was their way of greeting. For us, it'd be like a handshake. Uh, and so that's what we have here. He's continuing or finishing out this greeting, but he's also letting the soldiers know this is who Jesus is. And so Jesus now greets Judas by saying, "Friend." That's a strong word to refer to the one whom you know is here to betray you. Another way we might describe that word is companion. Against whom have you come? If Judas had any of his senses left at this moment, I'm hoping that these words cut to the quick. Surely you, who have been my companion, who have traveled with me for all of these years, who have been witness to my words, to my miracles, to my deeds, surely you have not come against me. Because after all, Judas is leading this band of soldiers. And again, Jesus knows what's going on. And he makes no pretenses here to act as if, he doesn't know what's about to happen. He flat out tells Judas, I know you're not the one that's leading this. Luke's account has Christ asking, have you come to betray the Son of Man with a kiss? Son of Man here refers to the idea of the Messiah, the Christ. And again, the idea here is to hopefully snap Judas out of this mentality that he's in, because Judas had the evidence. Remember, a few weeks back, Jesus made the statement, although Judas wasn't here at the time, believe on me, not just because I said so, but because of the evidence. Well, hopefully by making this statement, he's trying to encourage Judas to look at the evidence. You're about to betray the Messiah. And in the Greek language, we don't necessarily see this in the English, but every word that Jesus speaks to Judas at this moment is emphatic in nature. It's not simply, well, have you come to betray the Son of Man with a kiss? Have you come to betray me? Have you come to betray the Son of Man with a kiss? There's this emphasis on what he's saying, imploring Judas to realize what he's doing. And think about this for a moment. Let's just break this phrase down. Betrayest. Do you violate your obligations of faithfulness to betray the master? Betrayest thou? You who have been with me so long, you've been a faithful companion to me. You've been favored by the Messiah, you of all people. Betrayest thou the Son of Man, the Messiah, the hope of all nations, the Redeemer of the world, the one through whom all sins will be forgiven? Betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss, with a sign of friendship and affection? You really choose to use this in a wicked, deceit-filled way? Now, John's account has Jesus asking the question, whom seek ye? When they told him they sought after Jesus of Nazareth, he responds by saying, I am. Now notice how the soldiers responded at this moment. We're told that they fell to the ground. They didn't just like go back kind of stunned. They fell to the ground. And I've heard some individuals say, well, it was probably a response of shock because they're used to whenever they're seeking after a criminal or someone of that nature, that criminal would try to run, they would try to lie, they would do something to keep from being arrested. But they were shocked that this person was so honest to say, well, that's me. Now, what I'm about to say is 100% pure opinion. And I feel like I can kind of do this in a Bible class. I don't know per se that 500 to 600 men would be so shocked by someone saying, well, that's me, that they would fall to the ground. I kind of wonder in the back of my mind if there's something more at play here. That maybe the power of Christ is shown in this instance, that with the mere word of his mouth, I am he, that these men are driven to the ground. Not because of shock on their end or because they're stunned by this individual who's so willing to turn himself into them, but because the word of Christ caused that to happen. And again, as I state, that's an opinion, but it's something that I tend to wonder here is if he is trying to present more evidence of who he is at this moment to his audience. Go ahead. Hmm? Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. That's that's right, because the word he is in italics in the King James, so he would have simply just said I am. So that's a good catch. Uh, mhm. 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 He does. Mhm. Yes, sir. And if you didn't hear Billy, he points out the fact he's referencing Exodus 3, verse 14, I think it is, where Moses is asking God, well, the children of Israel are going to ask who sent me. What do I tell them? And God said, I am that I am. Thus shalt thou tell the children of Israel, I am hath sent thee. That may not be a perfect wording, but that's the gist of it. Again, I am hath sent thee, the all existing one, the eternal one, the all powerful one. That's who sent you. And it's this, and in other instances, Jesus would respond in such a way that would reflect back to that statement. Before Abraham was, I am. And here, Jesus of Nazareth, I am. And so there's that reference back to who he is. And also, if you didn't hear, Billy had mentioned the fact that um, you don't read about the kiss in John's account or in Matthew's account, just in Mark's and Luke's. But from the moment that Judas plants that on Jesus, Jesus basically takes control of this situation. And he's going to be the one that is in control of it, has kind of power over this as the proceedings continue. And so it's interesting to see how all of that plays out going through the text here. And I appreciate you for bringing that up. I do. Jesus again asked the same question. Response is the same. And again, notice what he says here. He says, I have told you that I am. If therefore you seek me, let these go their way. And I find it interesting, he says, I told you, I am. Again, there's that reference, but then his attention turns not to his own safety, but to that of his disciples. And again, that's something that this may have been somewhat shocking, because every so often I have a varied taste. I'll watch videos on YouTube. And one of the things I've actually started watching are certain police videos, like of as they're interviewing someone at the scene of a crime, something of that nature. And last night I saw one, or yesterday afternoon I saw something that stood out to me. A young woman was going to get arrested, and she found out that they were going to let her boyfriend free because he had done nothing wrong, but she was getting arrested. And you know what she immediately does? She turns around and she tries to get her boyfriend arrested, which is, great girlfriend material right there. But she's not concerned about, him or his well-being or anything of that nature. She wants to take him down with her. That wasn't what Jesus did. Jesus didn't say to his disciples, well, if you take me, you got to go through them first. He said, I told you, it's me. This is who I am. Now let them go free. Let them go peacefully without any harm. So his attention turns to their well-being. I can appreciate the fact that that's where his mind goes at that moment. And why is all of these things said? Why are they going through all of this? Well, he said so the saying might be fulfilled. And it might be John 17, verse 12. While I was with them in the world, I kept them in thy name. Those that thou gavest me I have kept, and none of them is lost, but the son of perdition, that the scriptures might be fulfilled. In his prayer, he points out the fact that he wants safety for his disciples, that they continue to be safe, although he knows that the only one of them who will be lost is the son of perdition, that is Judas. Then we're told they laid their hands on Jesus. It's at this point that Peter kind of lives up to his statement. He said, I will go where you go. I am willing to die with you. And at this moment, he's ready to prove that point, because we're told that Peter strikes the right ear of Malchus. Now, there might be a lot of questions that we have in our minds as to why this occurred, what went down and things of that nature. I'll tell you one thing right now that I do know. I guarantee you Peter was not aiming for Malchus's right ear. He was likely aiming for something else. Yeah, if he could have, he probably would have taken his head off. Thank God he didn't. That's true. Jesus could probably reattach it, no problem. It's interesting here that Peter had, constantly made the statement, they might betray you, I won't do it. They might, but I won't. And so far, he's living up to that claim. He'd rather die with the Savior than allow Jesus to lose his life. But Peter's about to find out that his zeal is a bit misplaced. Because now Peter's rebuked. And it's important that Peter's rebuked here, and we should pay attention to this. Christ nor his religion is to be defended by secular arms. God can support his people. Thus Christ tells Peter, put your sword away. Why? Jesus tells us why. Those who take up the sword shall die by the sword, or they'll perish by the sword. And that word perish means to be destroyed fully. And yes, you could better translate it as die. But we quote this all the time. He who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. This is where we get it from. Jesus is saying, go ahead, Bruce.
Do we know anything else about how he mentioned Israel or
to the best of my understanding, and again, this is the best of my understanding, I don't think he is. I don't read of him in the book of Acts anywhere, and I would assume that if there would be anyone that we would read of in Acts, it would likely be Malchus. But this is the only time I read of him. I will say this, though. From what we're going to read in just a few moments, if I were in the shoes of Malchus, I'd be paying really close attention to everything that has just happened. And it would have me rethinking a number of things that I'd been doing. We'll get into that in just a moment. That's true. Billy points out, Billy said that he may have been somewhat in charge because he was up front. He was one of the ones, he was close enough to the disciples and to Jesus that Peter could go swinging that sword and catch him. So he was probably one of the head guys that was there. So that is something that very likely the case. But Jesus tells him, you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword. The idea that is that those who partake in battle, who take themselves up in war, will likely die in said battle. Not everyone will, obviously, but that does happen in war. When people go to war, someone dies more often than not, and it's usually not one or two individuals. This could be seen as a warning to both the Jews and the Gentiles that are standing up before him, because literally both groups took up the sword at one point in time in the future, and they perished as a result. The Jews took up swords, so to speak, in what they're doing to Jesus here. Well, they perished at the hands of the Romans. And while we don't have time to go through all the history, the Romans began to face defeat after defeat after defeat at the hands of the Goths and the Vandals and other groups. Well, John's account has Christ telling Peter to put away his sword and asks a question. This cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink it? This is the same cup that not long ago he was saying, if there's be any way that this cup can pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. Now he's saying, I have to face this, Peter. There's no options here. You're trying to take away my purpose by doing this. The cup of suffering that Christ had to endure, he had to endure so people like Peter and you and me and Malchus and others could have their sins washed away. Peter, without realizing it, was trying his best to stand in the way of God's plan. And so Christ is telling Peter, I am willing to face this. I am willing to suffer. I'm willing to die. Even knowing everything he's going to go through, he says, Peter, step back and let me do my job. Interestingly enough, the Persian version says, I will not give it to another to drink. Almost as if Jesus is saying that Peter was trying to snatch the cup of suffering out of the hands of Jesus so that he himself could drink of. Luke's account adds something new here. Christ tells the disciples to allow the proceedings to take place. Peter was to put away his sword, and as we stated, now Christ heals Malchus. And again, I want us to think about this for a moment. Here is a man who is bent on taking Christ in for crimes he never committed. He doesn't seem to really care about whether or not justice is being served. He doesn't really care about whether or not this is right or wrong. He doesn't really care about those things. His mind is probably focused on, I'm just doing my job. And he does it. And in the process of this, here's Peter. Takes his ear off. And Jesus with tenderness. Because I don't think Jesus walked up to him and just went, that was an ear, what? Yeah, that was an ear, right? I am so glad that just wiggled. Because last time a part of my body went through a piece of glass, I had to get 13 stitches. But Jesus, let's step away from this. Jesus didn't just and slap the ear back on. And Malchus didn't look like a Picasso with the ear all crooked, reattached like good enough. You know Jesus took the time to place it back how it's supposed to go, for it to be reattached in the way that it should be, so that his ear was whole, so that he would have his hearing, so that it would be as if it had never happened, save for probably the dried blood that is now on the side of his head and his neck and his clothing. Can you imagine what's going through the mind of that man at this moment? It's one of those instances where in the back of my head, I kind of hope he's one of the individuals on the day of Pentecost who makes the statement, men and brethren, what shall we do? And when they hear, repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ for the remission of sins, I hope he's one of the ones who answers. I don't know. I won't find out until eternity. And a statement that one of my teachers made to us is, all the questions that you've got that we can't answer, write them down. You can ask them in eternity. By the time we get there, we may not care about it so much at that point because we're with God. But there's so much there I don't know, but I wish. But I will throw this out. Jesus is the ultimate example for us in the fact that here is one of his enemies. And what is his first response? To help him. Matthew 5, verses 44 through 45, Jesus said, but I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father, which is in heaven. For he maketh the sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and the unjust. Now Jesus asks a question. Don't you know that I could send 12 legions of angels? Instead of having 11 people fighting for him, God could just send 12 legions of angels. And again, the number here, a little bit different depending on the period of time. Could have been 4,200, could have been 5,000, could have been 6,000. Had it been the latter number, then we're probably talking around somewhere 72,000 angels. Now, if you want to know what 72,000 angels can do, we just need to look back to the example in the book of Isaiah of what one angel was able to do to an enemy army. You mean 72,000 angels? That's a lot. In other words, if this was not God's will, don't you think he'd be able to protect me and then some? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled? What if God did send those angels to destroy the Romans and the Jews who sought the life of Jesus? How would the scriptures be fulfilled? And we don't have time to read it, but I would encourage you to read Isaiah chapter 53. There's your scriptures. Isaiah 53 points out everything we need to know there. That all that is taking place at this moment happened according to the scriptures. And in that very same hour, Jesus said to those who were in front of him, are you come out to me as a thief with swords and clubs to take me? I sat with you daily in the temple teaching, and no one laid hands on me. At the time that this was said, Judea historically was infested with robbers. It was said to be at the point where armed men had to be hired to protect individuals as they traveled from city to city or as they traveled at night. And that might be the gist of what Jesus is saying. He's saying, you came to me like I'm one of the thieves that's bent on harming others? Why are you coming to me in this hostile manner? I sat with you constantly in the temple. And I went about there to teach salvation to men. And you didn't do anything then. You could have easily done it then. But Luke adds, this is your hour and the power of darkness. That is, this was not the hour of betrayal necessarily, but the reference to darkness can either mean that they chose to do this during a period of darkness where the actions would have been hidden from the eyes of men, or it could mean the fact that the actions they were doing at this moment were darkness. Because there is there's kind of a picture of righteousness and sin, where righteousness is light and darkness is sin. So what you're doing right now are the works of darkness, the works of sin by doing this. But we'll have to stop here this morning. We'll finish. We've got just a very little bit to finish, but we'll finish that next week and then get into the next lesson. I appreciate everyone's kind attention, and